Welcome to the Data Whisperer podcast, brought to you by Data Migration International, the podcast where you hear the latest news from the world of data and digital transformation. The Data Whisperer podcast is hosted by Bill Wohl, a technology industry veteran and enterprise software professional.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us today as we continue our discussions about the intersection of technology and business. Today, we're talking about the business of IT and procurement and supply chain, and of course, the role that data can play, and even about some of the new augmented technologies that are very much of interest in the market today. Hello, everyone. My name is Bill Wohl, and I'm honored to be the host of this podcast series, The Data Whisperer, brought to you by Data Migration International. I'm always fascinated about how we apply technology and services to help companies meet their business challenges. And having worked for years in the IT industry, I know the power of data that's been driving success for customers for many years. That's why I'm very pleased to welcome to the program a seasoned tech executive. He's had a number of chief titles. Some would call him a futurist. Dr. Marcell Vollmer has worked as a chief digital officer, operating officer, procurement officer, innovation officer, a partner at Boston Consulting, and is currently the CEO of Prospitalia Group. Marcell and I were colleagues back in the day at SAP, so I'm happy to have him on the Data Whisperer podcast. Marcell, welcome to the program. Great to have you.
Well, many thanks, and also welcome from my side. Appreciate that you are having me.
Well, let's start before we dig into the data topic. Tell us a little bit about Prospitalia. What's your business? Where do you fit into the industry?
So basically, we are a procurement marketplace for hospitals, providing everything in the healthcare industry, what is needed. Healthcare is a growing market, a 9 trillion market out of the 100 trillion global GDP, and therefore definitely a very important segment. And our main focus is providing this for the German market, but we also have business in UK, in Australia, and running a kind of comparable to an Amazon marketplace. It's a little bit different because we are talking about medical devices, FDA regulations, and things like that. But basically, that's in a nutshell what we do, a private equity-owned group.
So it's always seemed as your career, as I've followed you through the years, has been around procurement and supply chain. Now, as you get into the healthcare space, the role of data in all of those industries is similar, or are there differences, or is data at the center of everything?
No, I couldn't agree more, Bill, what you are saying about data is the center of everything. In healthcare, probably one thing is a little bit special for good reasons. This is data protection, data security. Of course, you don't want that everyone has access to your health data. On the other side, you also rely on having access to the anonymized data for a very good reason, because if there are similarities and if you have a certain illness, you definitely want to get the best possible treat for whatever you have. And therefore, I think data is really everything. And with the new capabilities, what we have with artificial intelligence, for example, or machine learning to be precise, which is part of artificial intelligence, look at the success rates, what we have for and take breast cancer as a great example. So the quality and the speed, what a machine can do today to really identify if you have a certain risk for cancer, this is really mind blowing. And definitely these machines are getting better and better every day due to the learning. And this is a great example why data is so important. And you can really go for a much broader scale for different illnesses, different areas where you can leverage the benefits of big data and the analytics.
So we learned, both having worked at SAP, that best practices can be shared across industries, even when industries are very, very different. Let's talk about supply chain for a moment. As you come into the healthcare space, what are some of the things you're seeing in supply chain and healthcare that could be lessons learned for other industries, or vice versa? Where is the state of supply chain in healthcare today?
Oh, Bill, that's a great question. And I think what's very important is really having an end-to-end overview and transparency about your supply chain. We have seen this in the pandemic, how critical it is to really understand where are my medical devices? Do I get it in time? Because there are patients in need, and no one wants to have a patient in need waiting longer than needed. And we have seen also what's happened when Shanghai, the largest harbor in the world, got closed. Basically, the ships did no longer go to Europe and to other places in the world. And by that, only if you have the transparency, if you have access to the data, you can also mitigate. And in certain areas, let's say you need a hip replacement or an implant, I think there are things which can wait, and a few days more, 1 week more, this is possible. You can really manage it. But if you're really in a critical condition, if you have a heart attack, there is no way to wait. There is no waiting. Otherwise, you are dead. And therefore, having access to the data and know exactly where do you have the right medical equipment needed for patients in need, this is absolutely mandatory. And this is really one difference on the supply chain side, where it is even more critical compared to others. I know that when we look back on the automotive industry, the just-in-time delivery to a supply chain, it's amazing. But we have also seen how fragile it is. One ship in the Suez Canal can bring an entire supply chain to a stop. And therefore, you better know exactly where are your goods and what is it exactly what you see as a risk and how can you mitigate the risk. You better think in advance what to do in a case that this happens.
When we talk to supply chain and data executives, very often the two words that come up in the conversation are disruption and resilience. How do those two words play into the space you're in now in healthcare? I suspect they're just as critical.
Absolutely. And I think a disruption, the Black Swan events are great examples.
Mm-hmm.
When I look back at my time, and you mentioned we go back to the time at SAP, when I was Chief Procurement Officer, 2011, some might remember what happened in that year. There were two really critical events, two catastrophes, what we have seen. The first one was Fukushima. I was a few weeks in my job. And basically, we thought, oh, wow, horrible what happened with the nuclear plant in Japan. On the other side, I asked my team immediately, what is really happening right now? And are we impacted as SAP? At this time, I was working for SAP. Is there anything what we need to consider? And everyone was saying, no, we don't have suppliers in this particular area, so therefore we should be good. What we learned a little bit later, and I was also having conversations at a procurement conference with other CPOs, and basically they were exactly saying the same what my team was giving me as a briefing. No business there. But what we have not considered is the tier 2 or tier 3 suppliers. So basically, we might be dependent on certain supplies from suppliers in that area. And this is an example for a disruption where you really need to think about, and now it comes to resilience, have you thought about, can you mitigate critical suppliers, what to do if you are not getting something at a certain point in time? What happens with your production? SAP, of course, it's a software company. Therefore, we don't have a critical supply chain in a way that basically the entire production will come to a stop if we are not getting certain goods. That's a very fortunate thing. But on the other side, and I give you a second example on a disruption, which was the flood in Thailand, same year. So we learned in a hard way that basically 2/3 of the global production of hard disk is happening in Thailand. And basically by that, when you are, and this was the time where all the software companies were building very fast data centers for the cloud business, was at the upcoming, at the rise at this point in time. What do you do without hard disk? So basically, you can't really provide anything in time for your customers. Fortunately, and here that's a great example of resilience, we had the right contracts in place with the IT category team, thinking about, hey, we want to have certain guarantees in the case of a disruption, what can happen, whatever reasons. Fortunately, the reasons were not specified. But basically, in that case, we want to have a guarantee that we get first the hard disk, whatever you produce in a case of a disruption. And this was a great example how we could mitigate the risk and become more resilient in this particular area. I know it doesn't work for everything, but I think these are two great examples on disruptions as well as on how to mitigate and become more resilient as a procurement organization for your supply chain.
So we hear a lot of discussion continuing. It's certainly over the course of the last 10 years about digital transformation and the pace at which industries and geographies are moving towards digital processes. But if you think about the healthcare industry, now that you're into it, very often we hear that healthcare is sort of behind the bell curve, and there's still a heck of a lot going on in paper-based processing. Are you seeing that from where you sit?
Well, I couldn't agree more. And this is really a topic in healthcare. I was a little bit shocked coming from a software company, working for a startup, doing process analytics, process mining, what Celonis was, or even as a partner at BCG. I thought I've seen everything basically, and also the different stage of digital transformation, what companies, what industries have. What I learned in healthcare is, oh wow, they are really far behind, and a lot of processes are still paper-based. Look, for example, on how medical devices are getting ordered. It is still fax. Can you imagine a telefax putting something on paper and then sending it to a supplier to order something? This is so outdated. But when you look now, and this is more a systemic thing, what healthcare has. I had the pleasure also, and was a great experience for me as someone with no medical background, and fortunately also with not a lot of time spent at hospital in my lifetime, going into an OR and really seeing what is happening during an intervention. How does the entire supply chain, the warehousing process works? How do we get the patients implants or critical medical devices, what they need? When I've seen, wow, this is paper-based, and people are really taking notes with a pencil on paper, going to a warehouse and then putting a tick on the list that they are taking something, and later on they pile up the paper, and then someone else is manually entering it. I was thinking about, oh wow, gosh, that's really far behind, and probably that's something which has, on the positive side now, a lot of room for improvement to really go to the next level, because we need to have the data in real time. And if you have a paper-based process, come on, you are not having really full transparency about what's in your warehouse, where are your medical devices, and also in a case of a crisis, and we mentioned this, what do you do? How do you really get everything in time? And therefore, we definitely have a lot of potential for improvement here in the healthcare industry. I would definitely rank healthcare at the bottom of all the industries, depending if you say it's 20, 25 industries, whatever you want to say, but healthcare probably is at the bottom 5, I would say, on the digital transformation journey. And that's hopefully something which is supposed to change very, very soon.
We talk a lot about the bell curve of adoption of technology, and there are always brands that are way out in front, and they're willing to take the risks and break glass, and they're the first movers. And then there's a large group of companies that sort of work their way through, and there are the laggards. You've talked about healthcare doing that. What is that journey for healthcare? Is that a 5 to 10 year journey to get healthcare further along that bell curve?
That's a tough question, and as we know, healthcare, it's a little bit different in the US compared to Europe or in Asia, as we have different systems here in place. I would say US is a little bit more advanced already. Europe is very much also funded by the government, a public healthcare system, what you have. When I see also how long it takes really to run large infrastructure projects here in Europe, I would say it's more 10 to 15 years journey, what we have. I doubt that we have the time, and I would definitely say I'm talking now about the overall digital transformation, also getting rid of the paper-based processes. When it comes how to use the medtech space, and I mentioned breast cancer as one example. Fortunately, we are not far behind here, and definitely also leveraging AI now. All the opportunities what we have by using machine learning algorithms, and also the latest, greatest, whatever in technology got invented. I think that's fortunately something for the benefit of the patients, where we are already in the play and very well positioned. But I think really when you look at the digital transformation, also how you want to use the data, that's also something where I have to say, people are getting tired of filling out all these forms and doing this again and again by changing a doctor. Can't you have a medical record on your iPhone and basically transfer that? Basically, Google knows everything where I am. And I think, okay, you can argue, is this a good thing or not? But basically, I think there's a standard set of information which you could make really accessible with an API interface to a computer system.
Yeah.
Where you say, hey, these are the public data I'm willing to share with my name, my age, and certain medical base information. And then I think you could also think about how can you also keep certain information with you. You might also have a medical emergency. I'm traveling a lot, and what's happening if I'm traveling on Sunday to the United States? So there's a 8 hours time difference. What we are talking about. So basically, what's happening in a medical emergency? How can I also ensure? Because I'm very interested that everyone who wants to help me has access also to the information needed. And I think that's definitely something which I would see more on in a mid to long term perspective.
Let's hope we get there, because all of us can benefit that. You talked about AI and machine learning. Obviously, lots of discussion going on about language models like ChatGPT and others. Sounds like, at least in the healthcare space, those technologies are very much in play on the diagnostic side of the business. It's going to be a struggle for them to be in the supply chain and procurement space until some of these paper-based processes are set aside. But the promise is there in healthcare. Whereas from your futurist perspective, where are we going with these technologies? Certainly there are those that are fearful of them, but the business benefits are pretty real today.
Absolutely, and you're right saying that on the diagnostic side we have already a lot of access to data, which is a good thing, because what is machine learning about? You need to have really a huge amount of data to really make the learning meaningful. On the other side, I would also add robotics to that. And when you have seen a Da Vinci system, a robot which can do a remote intervention at a patient, I think that's really mind-blowing. When you see how this works on a machine, you can really think about and looking a little bit into the future by that. You could have access to the best specialist for a certain intervention anywhere in the world. And right. If you can make it possible, like we do now, a call like this possible with an internet connection, what we have, I think the best possible specialist can help any patients in the world by having access also to certain robotics, where we see really that we have huge advancements here on the technology side. That's definitely an area I would see. I also see that with artificial intelligence, and when you look now more on genetics and understanding really the DNA of individuals, you might be even able to say, hey, you might have a certain risk for certain illnesses. You might have a history, or your family has a history on that. That's something also where you can think about, can you link this to nutrition? Can you link this also to the way that you have probably a little bit earlier than other people of your age range, the right checkups to really see that you are not having a risk and not basically getting a very bad illness like cancer or anything like that. I think we will definitely see huge advancements here, and hopefully we will get older and older. It's really amazing seeing that, what the average age is right now, and hopefully also that we feel very well, because getting older is not a benefit per se. It is also that you feel very well and really can enjoy life. And this is something where healthcare is definitely contributing a lot with the advancements of technologies.
What you're describing with these technologies is really about the intersection of people and machines, and the potential for data to assist, as you suggested, medical experts to do interventions anywhere is kind of interesting. I want to touch on one last quick topic and then we'll wrap up. You talk a lot in the procurement and supply chain space about this term glocalization. What do you mean by glocalization?
So glocalization is when you combine the benefits of globalization, like the production, what we have seen in Far East for to get the labor arbitrage as a benefit. You need now to balance this and look a little bit on the risk side. And you mentioned resilience. That's something also where you think about, it's great. And I think globalization will continue. Don't get me wrong. It's definitely something I'm strongly believing in, that this will continue, but probably also thinking a little bit about how can we also balance this a little bit more, that we are not too much dependent on certain suppliers. One single ship can bring an entire supply chain between Asia and Europe to a standstill. And that's also something when you now enhance as a few a little bit by criteria like sustainability. That's definitely a topic right now. As CO2 is getting a price, you need to think about how can you really balance this a little bit, and what is the best mix of your supply base. And then I hope that you can leverage this and really go for the next level of digital transformation. I call it bionic. You mentioned the machine-human interaction. Mm-hmm. You can say augmented reality, or augmenting also the human capabilities, what we have. But I think bionic might be a great term to say, going really for a more combined view on leveraging the technology, the latest, greatest, ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, and much more. And the humans, because we as humans are still absolutely key to really keep the world going. And in healthcare in particular, that's an area where you need the experience and the doctors combining also and really coming to the right conclusion at the end. Mm-hmm. When you see all the data, getting access to more might help here, and really hopefully the patient is benefiting from that.
Sounds good. You know, Marcell, every time we have a chance to talk, I learned so much about the topics, and all of you that are tuning into the podcast today can engage directly with Marcell on LinkedIn. He's got a good feed to follow because a lot of his posts are a place to learn about what's happening in data, AI, tech topics, and now, of course, in the healthcare space. Marcell Vollmer, thanks so much for being on the program today.
Bill, many thanks for having me. It was a great pleasure again.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Our podcast series will regularly take a look at the latest news from the world of data and digital transformation. We encourage you to join in the discussion. We'll have details on how to engage with us as our program wraps up. For everyone on the Data Whisperer podcast and all of the folks at Data Migration International, I'm your host, Bill Wohl. So long, and we'll talk again soon.
We hope you enjoyed listening to the Data Whisperer podcast, brought to you by data experts, Data Migration International. You can find out about our business and services by visiting jivs.com. That's JIVS.com. To follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn, simply search for Data Migration International. Stay tuned for further podcasts in the Data Whisperer series from Data Migration International.